The early morning sun cast long, distorted shadows across the Rio Grande Valley as Irene Martinez adjusted her USPS cap. The vinyl of the driver's seat in her delivery truck was already warm, a promise of the oppressive heat to come. Her blue uniform shirt, the same style she'd worn for 7 years, clung to the back of her neck. 7 years since she'd gone from part-time mail carrier, a student with dreams, to this. A woman encased in a routine as rigid and unforgiving as the Texas landscape. She checked her route sheet, a litany of familiar streets clipped to the dashboard, and pulled out of the depot parking lot. 7 years. The thought ambushed her every morning, but today it felt heavier, a physical weight in her chest. 7 years since her older sister Colby had vanished during her own Saturday route, leaving behind nothing but an empty house that echoed with silence and a case file gathering dust in a cold, forgotten drawer. Irene navigated the familiar grid of the valley town, past modest homes with chain-link fences and yards dotted with heat-stunned palm trees. She and Colby had once been a team, splitting hours between deliveries and classes at the career college on the north side. They had shared everything. The small house their parents left them after the car accident, their dreams of escaping the valley for better careers, even their matching USPS bicycles they used for the tight neighborhood routes. Colby had been the one with the real fire, the true ambition. While Irene struggled through her business courses, Colby had excelled in her nursing program, her textbooks filled with meticulous notes and brightly colored tabs. She was just 2 semesters from graduating when she disappeared. Irene could still see her that last morning, her face luminous with excitement, talking about the house she and her boyfriend Robbie would get, planning a future for the baby she was carrying, a future that had dissolved into thin air. The radio crackled, dispatch announcing a road closure on 10th Street, jolting Irene from the memory. She pulled over, sorting the next batch of mail with the unthinking muscle memory of long practice. After Colby vanished, Irene's own world had crumbled. The police investigation had stalled, a frustrating loop of maybes and dead ends. Grief had been a thick fog, making concentration impossible. She'd dropped out of college, taken the full-time position at USPS, and settled into a life that felt like sleepwalking. She was reaching for the ignition when her supervisor's voice, sharp and urgent, crackled through the radio. Irene, need you to call base immediately. Use the payphone at the Chevron on 5th. That was unusual. A cold knot formed in her stomach. They never asked drivers to call in unless it was serious. She wasn't allowed to carry a personal cell phone on her route, USPS policy. Whatever this was, they'd tracked her down with purpose. The payphone's receiver felt heavy and slick in her hand. Her supervisor, Jim Hendricks, a man whose weathered face had seen 30 years of valley sun, answered on the first ring. His voice was uncharacteristically gentle. Irene, I need you to listen carefully. We just got a call from the police department. They found a USPS bicycle in the city canal. They think it might be connected to Colby's case. The world tilted. Irene gripped the phone booth's hot metal frame to steady herself. What? Where? The North Canal, near the expressway, 83 overpass. City workers are draining it for maintenance. First time in years. One of them spotted it. The detectives want you there. I'll meet you at the scene. Irene didn't remember the drive. One moment, she was shrouded in the greasy heat of the phone booth. The next, she was pulling up to the canal. The flashing lights of police cruisers reflecting off the concrete embankment. Yellow tape cordoned off a wide section of the man-made riverbed. Jim's truck was already there, along with 2 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan she recognized as belonging to Detective Ray Orozco, the same detective who'd handled Colby's case 7 years ago. He looked older, the black of his hair now threaded with silver, but his eyes were just as sharp as they met hers. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." He gestured to a city worker in a yellow safety vest. "This is Marcus. Marcus, tell Ms. Martinez what you told me." The worker, a young man with a nervous energy, shifted his weight. "We started draining the canal at dawn. When the water level dropped, I saw something blue sticking out of the mud near the support pillar. Thought it was trash, but when I got closer, I saw the U.S. mail on the side. Figured it might have been stolen, so I called it in." Can I see it?" Irene's throat was tight, her voice a stranger's. Detective Orozco nodded, leading her down the sloped concrete. The canal was a scar on the landscape, mostly empty now, with just puddles of murky water and a thick layer of accumulated silt. Near the base of a massive concrete pillar, a forensics team in white coveralls worked around a bicycle that had been pulled from the mud. Even from a distance, Irene knew. She forced her legs to move closer, her eyes taking in the standard issue blue frame, the distinctive mail baskets, the rust eating away at the chrome. It was a ghost from her past, resurrected from a watery grave. "Forensics has processed it," Detective Orozco said beside her. "Any prints or DNA would be long gone." "Did you call Robbie?" Irene asked suddenly, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "Robbie Delgado? Colby's boyfriend?" "We left messages at his home and his auto shop. He should be on his way." As if on cue, they heard rapid footsteps on the embankment. Robbie, still in his grease-stained mechanic's coveralls, hurried down, his face a mixture of confusion and dread. 7 years had softened his features. His hair was starting to recede, but the pain in his eyes was the same one Irene saw in her own mirror. "Irene," he said, slightly out of breath. "Jim called the shop. Is it really—" His gaze fell on the bicycle, and the color drained from his face. "That's a USPS bike, but how can you be sure it's hers? They all look the same." "Without personal identification, we can't be 100% certain," the detective admitted. "But we're pulling surveillance footage from this area from '97. The city had just installed new cameras back then. It's a long shot, but it's the first real lead we've had in 7 years. 7 years. The words hung between them. Irene looked at Robbie, a man who was once almost her brother-in-law, now a stranger bound to her by a shared, unending tragedy. "We should talk," Robbie said finally, his voice rough. "It's been a while. Maybe we can help each other through whatever this stirs up." He hesitated. "Most of Colby's things are still at my house, aren't they? She'd pretty much moved in before." "Yeah," Robbie said, his gaze distant. "I kept everything. Couldn't bring myself to... But now, I think maybe you should take it. I need to move on, Irene. It's been killing me living with all her stuff around." A flash of anger, hot and sharp, pierced Irene's numbness, but she pushed it down. "I understand," she said, the lie tasting bitter. "I'll come by after I get my car from the depot." The drive to Robbie's house took her through neighborhoods that held 1,000 memories of her sister. She and Robbie had leaned on each other in the early months, 2 shipwreck survivors, clinging to the same piece of wreckage. But time had eroded their bond, and the visits had dwindled to nothing. His small ranch-style house looked the same, a front yard that needed mowing, and his work truck, Delgado Auto Repair, painted on the side in fading blue letters. The front door opened before she could knock. "That was fast," he said, stepping aside. Irene stopped short in the living room. Cardboard boxes were stacked near the door, some sealed, others still open. She recognized Colby's neat, loopy handwriting on the labels. Winter clothes, nursing books, baby things. "I've been packing for a while," Robbie explained, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Just never could bring myself to finish. After this morning, it felt like it was time." Irene knelt beside a box, the sight of Colby's nursing textbooks a fresh stab of grief. Thank you for keeping everything. Yeah, well, he shifted uncomfortably. Like I said, I need to move forward. Speaking of which, Irene said, standing up, what about the private investigator? We always said once we saved enough. Robbie's expression tightened. About that, I have my share. It's just, things have changed. I might need that money for other things now. Other things? Irene's temper, simmering all day, began to boil. What could possibly be more important than finding out what happened to Colby? Before he could answer, a car pulled up outside, and the front door opened without a knock, and a woman's cheerful voice called out, "Honey, I'm home!" A woman stepped into the living room and stopped short, seeing Irene. She was pretty, with shoulder-length dark hair, but what made Irene's breath catch was the obvious swell of her belly beneath a flowing blouse. 4, maybe 5 months pregnant. "Oh," the woman said, her smile faltering. "I didn't know we had company." Robbie looked like a trapped animal. "Josephine, I didn't expect you. I texted you about moving my stuff, remember?" She looked between them, reading the tension. "Josephine, this is Irene. She's Colby's sister." "Irene, this is Josephine." Josephine's expression softened into one of rehearsed sympathy. "Oh, Colby. I remember the flyers. I'm so sorry for your loss." She placed a protective hand on her belly. The pieces clicked into place. The money, the boxes, the desperate need to move on. "So, you're really moving on," Irene said, her voice flat. "That's why you need the money. For..." She gestured vaguely at Josephine's stomach. "Irene, please," Robbie started. "No need," Irene said, holding up a hand. "I get it. 7 years is a long time to wait." Irene turned to leave, but Robbie followed her to the door. "I loved her, Irene," he said, his voice thick with a guilt that was 7 years old. "I still do, but I need..." "You need to live," Irene finished for him. "I understand." "Honey, I really do need help with my boxes," Josephine called from the doorway. Irene saw her cousin's pickup truck outside, packed to the brim. Despite everything, Irene felt a pang of sympathy. She remembered how tired Colby had been in her first trimester. "I'll help," Irene heard herself say. "I'm used to handling boxes." She walked to the truck and reached for a medium-sized box. Josephine's hand shot out, stopping her. "Oh, not that one," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. Robbie frowned. "What's in it?" Josephine's expression smoothed. "Just some old things I'm sending to my mother in Colorado. I was going to ship it." "Irene works for USPS," Robbie said. "She could take it to the depot for you." Josephine hesitated, but Irene was already lifting the box. "I can do that. Save you a trip." She grabbed a shipping form from her car. "Just fill this out." When Josephine handed it back, Irene glanced at it. "You put a different address for the sender, not Robbie's." "I'm keeping my apartment for a few more months," Josephine explained breezily. "Just in case, you know? Moving in together is a big step." It sounded reasonable. Irene tucked the form into her pocket and carried the package to her car, setting it carefully in the back seat among the boxes of Colby's life. Halfway to the depot, her phone rang. "Detective Orozco." "Ms. Martinez, I have news. We've obtained surveillance footage from 7 years ago. The traffic department still had the archives. I think you need to see this." At the station, in a small, windowless room, Detective Orozco played the grainy footage. There was Colby, in her uniform, walking her bicycle into an apartment building on the corner of Vine and Industrial Boulevard. The timestamp read 4:47 p.m. "Here's where it gets concerning," Orozco said, fast-forwarding. The sun set. Streetlights flickered on. Colby never emerged. Then, at 11:23 p.m., a figure in a dark, oversized hoodie pushed the USPS bicycle out of the building. Another camera near the canal showed the same figure. A woman with long, wavy dark hair spilling from the hood, hefting the bicycle over the concrete barrier and into the water. "My God," Irene breathed. "Someone did something to her." "In that building?" "We believe the building is 4782 Industrial Boulevard," an officer said. Industrial Boulevard. The name echoed in her head. Irene's heart hammered against her ribs. She fumbled for the shipping form in her pocket. The sender's address stared back at her. Josephine Miller, 4782 Industrial Boulevard, apartment 514. The same building. The exact same building where Colby was last seen alive. "A detective!" she said, her voice shaking as she held up the form. "Look at this. This is from Robbie's new girlfriend, Josephine. She lived there!" They raced to the apartment building. The receptionist, an older woman named Dolores, confirmed Josephine had lived there for nearly 8 years. When Orozco asked about her appearance, Dolores laughed. "She has short hair now. Just cut it all off a few days ago. Such a shame. She had the most beautiful, long, wavy hair, all the way down to her waist." The detective showed Dolores a still from the surveillance footage. Dolores squinted. "The hair looks similar, but I couldn't swear to it." She confirmed Josephine owned a dark hoodie, just like the one in the picture. Orozco called Robbie's number. On the third ring, Robbie answered. "Hello? Mr. Delgado, this is Detective Orozco. Is Josephine Miller with you?" Yeah, she's right here." A woman's voice, sharp and urgent, cut him off in the background. "We're late for the doctor's appointment, honey. We need to go." The line went dead. Orozco immediately issued a BOLO for Robbie's truck. They might be attempting to flee. He ordered Irene to go home for her own safety. Reluctantly, she drove back to her small house, her mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed the front gate, which she always latched, was slightly ajar. Her blood ran cold. The front door was also unlocked, cracked open just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness inside. Someone was in her house. She pushed the door open, calling out, her voice trembling. The house was silent, but it was a predatory silence, thick with menace. She moved down the hallway to her bedroom, her phone clutched in her hand. She pushed open the door and screamed. A rope hung from the ceiling fan mount. Dangling from it, choking and struggling weakly, was Josephine, her face a grotesque shade of purple. In the corner, Robbie lay, crumpled on the floor, a syringe and other drug paraphernalia scattered near his unconscious form. Irene's shock gave way to a surge of adrenaline. She dragged a chair beneath Josephine's feet, scrambled onto her own bed, and clawed at the knot in the rope. It finally came loose, and they both crashed to the floor. Josephine gasped and coughed, curled on her side. "You're not leaving this world yet!" Irene snarled, her voice a raw sound of fury. "You have too much explaining to do!" She dialed 911, then Orozco, her words tumbling out. While she waited for the sirens, she saw a folded note on her dresser. The handwriting was neat, feminine. "You'll spend the rest of your pathetic life wondering and hurting, just like I did. Enjoy your nightmare." The interrogation of Dolores, the building manager, laid the ugly truth bare. She had taken Josephine in as a teenage runaway, had loved her like a daughter. Josephine had met Robbie, had become obsessed, pathologically jealous of the life Colby had. She called Colby up to her apartment for a package pickup, Dolores confessed between sobs at the station. And she killed her. I helped her clean up. I helped her get rid of the body. We buried her in the mountains. Irene listened, silent tears streaming down her face. "But that's not where she is now," Dolores added, her voice dropping to a whisper. 3 years ago, Josephine went back. She dug her up, said she wanted to keep her close, a reminder of what she'd done for love. The package. Irene's stomach heaved. Back at the station, Orozco put on latex gloves and carefully opened the box Josephine had given her. Inside, neatly folded, was Colby's USPS uniform, her sun hat, her mailbag. And in the center, wrapped in an old baby blanket, was an ornate ceramic urn. "No," Irene whispered, sinking to her knees. "No. No. No." Orozco lifted it carefully. On the bottom, a small typed label read, CM 1997. She was sending her to Colorado, getting rid of the evidence. And Irene had almost been her accomplice. The weight of it was crushing. Later that night, Irene stood vigil outside Robbie's ICU room. He was alive. Josephine, in a secure room down the hall, was also alive. Her life, and the life of her unborn child, saved by the sister of the woman she had murdered. The terrible, twisted irony of it all was a physical pain. But as Irene watched the steady rise and fall of Robbie's chest on the monitor, a cold resolve settled over her. The questions were answered. The nightmare had a face. She owed it to Colby to see this through. She would be there when Robbie woke up. She would be in the courtroom when Josephine faced justice. 7 years of grief had hollowed her out. But now a new purpose began to fill the void. She would be her sister's voice. She would ensure that Colby Martinez, the ambitious nursing student, the excited mother-to-be, the beloved sister, would finally rest in peace.